You know the feeling. You had a good session last night. You felt it. Something shifted. You went to sleep carrying a quiet certainty, the kind that feels different, the kind that makes you think, finally, this time. And then you woke up, and something in the room, or the light, or just the heaviness of the morning, refiled everything. By the time you were fully awake, the feeling was gone. The wish was back in the future, back in the category of things that have not happened yet, and you have not been able to figure out why. That is not a spiritual failure. It is not a technique error. It is something more specific than that. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what it is and exactly where in your day it happens. There is a move that changes all of this. It is not another method. I will show you precisely what it is. Here is the thing most people do not know. There is a self that refiles your life under nothing changed every single night. Not a metaphor, not a poetic way of saying you have a bad habit. A living, learned self, one that wakes up as you, that carries your memories and your name and the worn grooves of every conclusion you have ever made about what is real, and it catalogs the day's evidence the moment your eyes close. It puts your desire back where it found it, in the future tense. Waiting, unreal. It does this not because it is against you. It does it because that is every pattern it has ever learned to trust. And I built a free diagnostic so you can find exactly where this is happening in your own day. It is the companion to what we are going to walk through today. Grab it, link is in the description, follow along as we go. Now, here is the first thing most teachers get wrong about this, and it matters. They teach the technique as if the technique is the whole thing. Visualization, ascites, revision, scripting, mental diet. They are correct that the practice works. What they skip is what happens to the state between practices. You run your session, you feel it, you close your notebook or come out of SATs with a real sense of what it is like to already have the thing. And then you walk into your kitchen, or sit in traffic, or open your inbox, and the old self takes the wheel back, quietly, without announcement, not dramatically, just by resuming. That resumption is where the tide comes in. Think of a footprint on wet sand. Every session you make a clear impression, the shape of the new self pressed into the ground. And overnight, while you are not watching, the tide rolls in. By morning, the sand is smooth again, no trace. The old shape is the only shape. You spend the next session making the same footprint in the same wet sand and wondering why it will not hold. The footprint does not fail because you made it wrong. It fails because nothing has been placed above the tide line. That is the whole problem, stated plainly. This is where I want to plant something because it reframes everything that follows. The reason your techniques work sometimes and fail other times is not inconsistency in the technique. The reason is that the state you build in 1 hour of practice is meeting a force that has been running for 23 hours. And 23 hours compounding wins every time, not because you are weak, because you were never told that the other 23 hours were the work. There is a very short line from Neville's teaching that almost no one applies directly, and I will get to it in a few minutes because it is the key that unlocks what I am about to show you. Neville Goddard taught for decades, from the 1940s through the early 1970s, and he was relentlessly specific about one thing, that the state you occupy is the cause, not the visualization, not the affirmation, the state. What you are living from, the feeling tone of the self you inhabit across the whole day, is what the field of your life is organizing itself around. He said this in dozens of lectures across dozens of years, in ways that were almost provocative in their directness. But here is what got filtered out in the modern transmission of his work. Modern teachers took the technique and left the state. They kept SATs, kept revision, kept the ladder experiment, but extracted them from the context that made them work, which is the assumption running underneath them, not for 60 minutes, but continuously. Neville was not teaching a nightly ritual, he was teaching a way of inhabiting a self. And that is a 24-hour instruction, not a 1 hour one. The ritual is how you install the new assumption. The 23 hours afterward are whether it takes root or gets washed away. Before I show you the two stages where the washout actually happens, there is a specific signal that tells you which self is currently running your life. It is not what you would expect to look for. I will get to that in just a moment, because without knowing the signal, you cannot see the tide coming. Now, here's what stage one looks like from the inside. You have been practicing, you know the material, you can explain revision and assumption to someone else, and yet the results are inconsistent. Things move, then stall. Something manifests, smaller than expected, or it appears briefly and retreats. You feel the lift during the session, and then something flatter and more familiar by evening. You blame the technique. You look for a different approach, a better method, a more advanced teacher. You have done this before, maybe several times. This is not a technique problem. This is what I call the first stage of the washout, identity drift. The new state you built last night met the old self this morning, and the old self had more hours, more evidence, more familiar grooves. It did not argue, it just resumed, and you followed it, not by choice, not consciously, just because it is what you have always followed. The old self does not announce itself. That is what makes it so difficult to catch. It feels like you, it sounds like your thoughts. It carries your memory and your vocabulary and your reasonable interpretation of what is happening around you. And somewhere in that reasonable interpretation, it is refiling your desire under not yet. Right after that session where you felt it, the old self starts cross referencing the phone, the account balance, the conversation that did not go the way it should have if this were real, the appointment that got rescheduled, the silence from the person who should have called. Each one of these is a small piece of refiled evidence. The old self accepts each one. By evening, it has built its case. By morning, the verdict is in. Nothing changed. And this is exactly what the diagnostic walks you through, hour by hour. Now, here is something that stopped me when I first found it in Neville's early teaching from the 1940s. He made a distinction that almost no modern teacher picks up between wanting from a state and living from a state. His instruction was not to visualize the desire as something you are moving toward. His instruction was to assume the consciousness of the person who already has it, not the image of the end, the feeling base of the person for whom the end is already the beginning. That distinction sounds subtle. It is not. It is the whole difference. When you want something, you are living in the state of wanting. When you assume you already have it and mean it in the body, not just in the image, you are living in the state of having. The field around you reorganizes to match the state you are living in, not the state you visit for an hour, the one you inhabit for 23. The North Star line here is this. The state you fall asleep in is not the practice, it is the broadcast, and every hour between that and the next session is still broadcasting. Now, here is the scene I want you to recognize. It is late, the lights are off. You are in bed, and you are not quite asleep yet. And instead of holding the feeling you built in the session tonight, your mind is doing something else. It is replaying the day. Not all of it, the specific parts that did not match, the moment at work where the old pattern showed up, the financial number that has not moved, the person who still has not responded, the thing that is supposed to be different but looks exactly the same. You are lying there in the dark, adding it up, running the inventory of evidence that nothing has shifted. And that inventory is the last thing your subconscious receives before it goes to work for the next several hours. You are not doing this on purpose. You are not choosing to undermine yourself. You are doing what the old self always does at the end of a day. It audits, it reviews, it asks, is the assumption still safe to hold, or does the evidence say otherwise? And the evidence, the circumstantial surface of things, almost always says otherwise. So the old self refiles everything. Your desire goes back under not yet. Your waking self tomorrow picks up from there. This is the stage 2 washout, the nightly audit of the wrong witness. You have been allowing the old self to review the day, and it reviews it as if the external circumstances are the only real thing. As if the inner state you built means nothing against what the phone shows, what the bank says, what the person said or did not say. But here is the move. What if you understood that the review itself is the prayer, not the session, not the visualization? The ambient, habitual, unguarded review you run while your eyes are closed in the dark. That is the instruction going in. That is what the subconscious receives as the most recent, honest account of where you stand. And the subconscious does not argue with it. It accepts it, builds on it, and runs it forward into tomorrow. Now, here is where most people stop and lose everything they built. They understand the problem intellectually. They agree it makes sense. They close the video, feel a kind of resolve, go to bed, and let the old self run the nightly audit anyway. Because nobody gave them the specific counter move, just the idea. The reason most people try this teaching and still slip is not that they do not understand it. It is that understanding is not inhabiting. You can understand that the old self runs the review. You can know that, and still, lying in the dark, the inventory starts, and you follow it without realizing you just handed the pen back. Every day you do that, the tide comes in overnight and the footprint is gone by morning. 3 weeks of sessions, no compound, no root, just the same smooth sand. Here is the signal I mentioned earlier, the one that tells you which self is currently at the wheel. It is this: notice what you are narrating to yourself in the half hour before sleep, not your session, the thoughts running underneath it, between the images, that ambient narration, the commentary on the day, the assessment of where you stand. That is the signal. If the narration is still the old selves, the session above it is decoration. The deepest instruction is always the last one in. So here is the first part of the counter move. And there is a second part that most people miss entirely. I will get to it in a moment because the second part is the one that actually makes the first part hold. The first part is this: when you get into bed tonight, you are not going to review the day. You are going to remember the future. That sounds like a reversal, and it is. Neville's teaching at its core was that time is not a line. Your desired reality is not somewhere ahead of you. It is as fully real right now as the memory of yesterday. And the instruction is to assume it the way you assume a memory, not as something you are building toward, but as something that already happened that you are remembering, a memory of the future. Your subconscious does not know the difference between a vivid memory and a vivid assumption. It knows feeling, it knows the felt reality of what you presented. If you lie down tonight and feel the feeling not of wanting this to happen, but of remembering that it did, the quality of that broadcast changes. This is the time collapse. The old self keeps your desire in the future tense because its whole job is to sort reality by what is already confirmed. It puts the desire in the unconfirmed file by reflex every night. The move is to refile it yourself as the person who already lived it, who already received it, who is lying here remembering the day it happened, not pretending, assuming. There is a difference Neville was very precise about, and it is the difference between reciting a line and inhabiting a character. Now, here is the second part, the part that makes it hold. The reason the first part alone does not always work, and the reason people try it for a few nights and then drift back, is that the old self is not just running at night, it is running in the 23 hours between sessions, in the small, unguarded moments. The moment you finish the session feeling it and then catch the room and it drains out. The dinner question when a friend asks how things are going and you hear yourself narrate the old life out loud, confirming it. The moment you open the bank app, brace, see the number, and the number just became the verdict on who you are. That flinch, that refiling. The second part of the counter move is not a new session, it is a revision of those moments, done in real time. When the old self starts its audit, when the inventory begins, you interrupt it, not by forcing positive thoughts, which is a different and exhausting game, but by refiling the specific moment. Right there, the call that did not come is not evidence against the desire. It is part of the bridge. The number in the account is not the reality. The state you are living from is the reality, and circumstance follows it, not the other way. This is not denial. This is applied assumption, what Neville was pointing at when he said the revision is not just for the past. It is for the ongoing story your inner conversation is writing, hour by hour. Here is a pattern I have watched play out. and it has a very specific shape. Take someone who has practiced sincerely for 6 months. They know the material, their sessions are real, and yet the results are inconsistent. What is happening, almost without exception, is this: the session is one thing, and the other 23 hours are something else entirely. The inner conversation between sessions is still narrated by the old self. Every micro moment of doubt, every flinch, every inventory of what the external world is showing adds up. 23 hours of that against 1 hour of genuine session. The session is a seed. The 23 hours are weather. And if the weather is wrong, the seed never takes root. What changes when both hours work together, when the session sets the state and the 23 hours hold it and revise against contradiction, is that the seed gets ground. Not perfect conditions, not no contradictions, but a self that does not hand the evidence back to the old witness every time it shows up. Think about what that morning would feel like. Not a future morning, one you are imagining right now. The ordinary morning of the self who already has it. Same bed, same room. But this self does not lunge. There is no frantic check, no inventory running before the feet hit the floor. This self wakes up already inside the assumption, the way you wake up inside a memory of something real. The news, when it comes, does not surprise it. Money from directions that did not exist yesterday does not shock it. The call comes in and the self nods because, of course, that is what it expected. Not because it forced itself to expect it, because it has been living from that state in the unguarded hours for long enough that the outer world has organized to match. That version of you is not ahead of you. It is a choice about what you allow to run in the 23 hours you are not watching. This was never only about manifestation, by the way. This is about authorship. You have run a self your whole life that you did not choose, not your fault, you were handed it. And every day you do not consciously choose a replacement, the old one chooses for you, quietly, in the unguarded hours, in the nightly audit, in the narration between sessions. You did not fail. You were never told the self is something you run. Now you know. There is a final piece I have not told you yet, and it is the piece that separates the people who get a real compound effect from the people who try it for 2 weeks and go back to searching for the next method. I am going to give you that piece right now. The question is not which technique to use. The question is which self is narrating your day. Technique quality does not correlate with results when the narrator between sessions is still the old one. The session is one vote. The 23 hours are 23 votes. And democracy here is not metaphorical. The self that gets the most floor time wins. So the specific practice, the one that puts this into action within the next 24 hours, has three parts. First, tonight when you lie down, do not review the day as the old self would review it. Instead, remember the future. Pick the single specific desire that matters most right now. Feel into it not as something you are hoping will arrive, but as something that already came, that you are remembering. The texture of it, the quality of the relief, where you were when it happened. Let the feeling, not the image, be what the subconscious receives as you drift down. Second, in the morning, before the first narration of the old self begins, notice it. That is enough. Just notice it. The moment you see the old self starting its review, you have already interrupted its authority. You do not argue with it. You do not force positivity. You just gently refile. This is not the evidence. The state is the evidence. And return. Third, through the day, when the old witness speaks, the flinch at the number, the narration at dinner, the drain after the session, catch it and revise, not once, every time. This is not a daily ritual added to your schedule. This is a posture, a way of inhabiting the day as the author rather than the audience of your own story. If you are doing this work honestly and the results are still inconsistent, I want to be direct. Seeing the problem is the easy half. Naming the 23 hours as the real work is something this video has now done. Installing a state that holds across all of them, hour by hour, across the specific moments where the old self takes back the wheel, that is the half almost no one walks you through. Because a diagnosis is easy to give away, a protocol is not. So there is a specific next step for the people who want to actually close that gap. If you have tried every method and watched your manifestations slip by morning, the source code diagnostic is what I built for exactly this. It maps your actual 23 hours, not the session, the hours between them, where the tide comes in, where the old self's audit runs deepest. It is specific, it is free, and it is the first link in the description. Type that first link if you already know you want a complete step by step system and not just the diagnosis. That is the second link below. Tonight, before you go to sleep, try this. Remember the future ones as if it already happened, and let that be the last narration the old self hears. Hold it as a memory, not a hope. In his teachings from the 1940s, Neville said simply, dare to assume, not believe, not visualize. Assume, as in accept the consciousness of the person for whom it is already done. You already know the technique. Now you know the hours that decide whether it takes root or washes away. That is enough to begin tonight.